10 years ago, I was a sophomore at the Cleveland Institute of Music. And one morning, I walked into my music theory class, no doubt very excited to learn all about proper voice leading and harmony. But our teacher started class by standing next to the piano, and I could see that she had tears in her eyes. She said, "I know that sometimes we as classical musicians have a tendency to get wrapped up in our own world. But if any of you aren't aware of the tragedy that's happening right now in New Orleans, you need to turn on your television." I tried to act cool, but I was one of the ones she was talking about. I had no idea how bad Hurricane Katrina had gotten because I lived in a bubble. Now, the bubble is one of the first things they teach you. I started taking violin lessons when I was 5 years old, and my teacher was like, "Okay, here's your violin, here's your bow, and here's your bubble." And you learn that outside the bubble is where your friends get to play after school, and inside the bubble is where you practice instead. A little later in life, outside the bubble is where your boyfriend dumps you, and then inside the bubble is where you practice anyway. So you can see why the bubble is important. In fact, it's absolutely necessary. No one has ever gotten really good at anything without the bubble. But as my music theory teacher pointed out, it's not always a good thing. Well, for me, the bubble paid off when I won a job in the Richmond Symphony 6 years ago. But shortly after I moved here, I developed a desire to share classical music with a broader, younger audience. So I founded Classical Revolution RVA, which is an organization that gets away from all the formality that cloaks so much of the classical music experience today. So we perform in bars, restaurants, cafes, galleries, basically places that young people are already going to hear live music. There's no dress code. You can come and go as you please. You don't have to subscribe to an entire season. And we rely almost entirely on social media to get the word out. And these are all, in my opinion, steps in the right direction, because this approach seems to fit this generation's knack for not planning ahead at all. But perhaps the greatest innovation of Classical Revolution has been one that was a complete accident and totally low-tech. Bala, the venue where we've performed almost every month for the last 3 years, doesn't have a backstage area. You walk in, there's a stage, some seating, and a bar. And what that does is that it makes the musicians sit in the audience until it's their turn to perform. And when they're done, they have to go back into the audience. So when the lights come up and the concert's over, the audience and the performers are in the same space, physically and otherwise, because they've all just experienced the same thing. And that creates this really natural, low-key environment that's just ripe for connections between audience and musicians. And those connections have made our community stronger. So I got to thinking, what if we as classical musicians cared about our audience as much as we want them to care about classical music? What if we cared about them as individuals, each with their own interesting stories and backgrounds, likes and dislikes? What kind of culture would that foster? Because after all, the reason art is so important in our lives and in our society is that it expands our consciousness beyond language, beyond our own particular worldview, beyond our time and place. So if you want to talk about progress, it's not just playing Mozart in a bar. The biggest step forward we can take is going to be to take that experience of expanded consciousness past the stage, outside the concert hall, beyond the art museum, outside of our bubble, and to care genuinely, maybe not about every last person on earth, but at least about every last person who comes across our path. Thank you.